Today marks the 130-day limit of Elon Musk's time as a special government employee, but the White House says Musk's influence will live on as it continues the work DOGE began.
The entire cabinet understands the need to cut government waste, fraud, and abuse. They'll continue to work with the respective DOGE employees who have onboarded as political appointees at all of these agencies. So surely the mission of DOGE will continue, and many DOGE employees are now political appointees and employees of our government. And to the best of my knowledge, all of them intend to stay and continue this important work.
The president says on Truth Social this will be Musk's last day, but not really, because he will always be with us, helping all the way. DOGE estimates it has saved about $175 billion, amounting to about a little more than $1,000 per taxpayer. That is far less than Musk's initial target of $2 trillion, but Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is downplaying the shortfall.
I think Elon came in and 100 days did some very important work. One is the absolute level of cost cutting, which Elon has set in motion. So DOGE is not going to end with Elon. It is a way of thinking about cutting costs.
There's another big item on the president's agenda today besides his news conference with Musk. The president is in Pittsburgh today to promote a deal for Japan-based Nippon Steel to invest in U.S. steel. The White House says it will create about 70,000 jobs and add about $14 billion to the U.S. economy, and they insist the agreement will keep the American steelmaker under U.S. control. But the United Steelworkers Union is skeptical, saying the partnership raises more questions than answers.
Billionaire Elon Musk, recently appointed to President Trump's cabinet as Transportation Secretary and Border Czar, is now he is rounding up asylum seekers like cattle into his rocket ships. He calls them illegal aliens. The problem is the rockets keep exploding.
That's an oldie but a goodie. Have you ever seen something like when Donald Trump goes, "'Cause you'd be in jail, 'cause you'd be in jail." Let's test it actually on the show. Why not? Let's test it on the show. It's freaking free for all Friday. Get me the Trump "you'd be in jail" clip. It's so easy. You can test it. You'll laugh every time. There's some things that no matter how many times you've seen it, that's like the 100th time I've seen that meme of Elon Musk with the illegal aliens in his rocket. I'll laugh every single time. You can't help but chuckle. And ladies and gentlemen, we need a bit of a laugh today. It's been one hell of a week, and it's going to be a very interesting day. President Trump will have a bombshell news conference live at what we assume is going to be around 2 o'clock. We're not exactly sure. We will be live for it. It'll be Elon Musk's great departure from the White House. We hear that he might get into a rocket and actually literally shoot off from the White House lawn. We don't know. But it's going to happen. It's going to be wild. Donald Trump doing a full press conference with Elon. So that's going to be very, very interesting today, Friday, May 30th, 2025. The truth behind who really ran the White House has been revealed by a DNC member who is a leader and an internal understanding of what really happened with Joe Biden is starting to come to light. What will happen next? Well, we actually have a bit of a build-out for you on that. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Bongino and Kash have been laying the groundwork for something really big, and we're going to talk about it today with Viva Frei, who's a spectacular commentator on legal issues and on the nature of the deep state. Also, Lynn Patton joining us from the White House today. My name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show. Okay, let's test this out. Let's test it out. I'm going to play you the probably the most famous clip in all the history of politics. There isn't a more famous clip than this, ladies and gentlemen. This is Donald Trump. This is a moment that broke politics, that changed the fabric of our nation forever, that changed the fabric of our political lifestyle forever. Like this was the singularity, right, where the atom split. And you can't watch it without laughing. I've seen this clip 100,000 times. You've seen it 1,000,000 times. Try not to laugh. Here's the challenge. Try not to laugh. Go.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
Yeah, all right. Here, let's time it.
Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
All right. We're going to try it again. Colden's running the show today. Colden's a spectacular video editor for us, and we're putting him through. We're going to like do a lot. We're going to do live rehearsals here for the show. Here we go. Colden, we're going to do the rap horn when Trump drops the line. Okay, here we go.
Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
There we go. Yes. All right. Come on. You know what? We're just going to roll with it. It's Free for All Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, it's also a day to remember not only this incredible moment, a moment that really, I mean, like taking a step back, that's the best, that changed politics forever. Nothing will ever be the same after that. Does Hillary Clinton deserve to go to jail? Yes. Is Hillary Clinton's worst days ahead of her? Yes, I believe so with this new FBI. I really, truly believe so. And you're starting to see the buildup for that. And we're going to talk about it on the show. What are they building toward? We have a lot of sources inside of this government. We're very close with some of the people in charge, and we've been making some phone calls. We're going to tell you all about that today on the program. Hillary Clinton's worst days are ahead of her, and it's something that I think is worth preparing the audience for, because the depths of depravity of these people know no bounds. We lost a friend yesterday. I want to talk just very briefly about Bernie Kerik. Bernard Kerik, Commissioner Kerik, was the police commissioner on September 11th. He was a friend of ours. He was on the show regularly. He was an honorable man. He was gone too soon at the age of 69. He was a good man, one of the very few. There are not that many left. Bernie Kerik, we were last with him just a couple of months ago. Here, these photos were taken during Kash Patel's swearing-in ceremony in February. And this is tough, man. It's tough. Bernie Kerik was one of the patient zeros for Democrat lawfare. They put Bernie Kerik in solitary confinement after all he did for this country. They went after him rabidly because he spoke out against Barack Obama. Eric Holder ran a illegal lawfare operation against Bernie Kerik at the order of the decaying Obama regime and Hillary Clinton and the cabal that has ran that party. They persecuted Bernie Kerik. He, persecuted before Donald Trump, was able to fight it off, fight through it, come out the other side a stronger man. Gone too soon is a very good and honorable, good cop, Bernie Kerik, and we remember him on this program. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure that in all aspects of life, you're guaranteeing that you have a strong sense of who you are and a strong sense of what you're fighting for. What we're fighting for on this program is the future for our children and leaving this country a better place for them. We are guaranteed the victory, and we are heading on to victory in this show, but we want to make sure that we are able to fight as strongly as we possibly can. Ensuring that we are healthy on this show is one of the primary objectives, given the fact that I am married to a nurse who is constantly ensuring that I have as healthy of food options in front of me. Is something that is very important in our household. That's why we use 120 Life. 120 Life is an all-natural way for me to manage my high blood pressure. You do get high blood pressure on programs like this. You do get high blood pressure inside of news cycles that are never ending and inside of some pretty intense moments. You want to make sure that you are controlling that and in charge of your own health. Ladies and gentlemen, 120 Life is what keeps me stable. It's endorsed by 750 different doctors. It's trusted by healthcare professionals across the country and also my wife. She is the number one healthcare professional that I trust. Ladies and gentlemen, these are just all natural ingredients, 5 all natural ingredients blended together that provide visible and measurable changes in your blood pressure. Use a simple monitor at home to track your progress, and 120 Life has a guarantee. Their guarantee is that you will see lower blood pressure numbers in 2 weeks. Go to 120life.com, Life.com. Use the code Benny and save 20%. There's nothing to lose except your high blood pressure numbers. Go to 120life.com and use the code Benny to save 20% off. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about health. Let's talk about the obvious worst thing that you can do to someone. The worst thing that you can do to somebody that you love is to allow them in very poor health to continue to suffer, to push them when they are incapable physically of moving forward into some of the worst environments on earth, some of the most high pressure environments on earth. That would be, of course, what we watched happen to Joe Biden. We watched it happen live, and when you go back through the tape, you realize exactly how evil what happened to Joe Biden truly is. Now, don't feel sorry for Joe. He was in on it. But the culpability still remains with those around him who presumably had high cognitive function. And it's beginning to really narrow as to who was responsible for what happened to Joe Biden. Obviously, his wife. Jill Biden is someone who's committed elder abuse on a mass scale. She's somebody who clearly abused Joe in office and did so for her own fame, her own power, her own capacity to run the country, which now we are starting to get a very clear picture as to how Jill Biden was running the country. Undercover video and evidence from inside of the DNC itself has revealed exactly who was behind this cover-up operation. If you follow the breadcrumb trail, and if you're able to actually see how Jill Biden created this ecosystem, this massive protection racket around Joe Biden, you're able to sort of understand the crime here. Let's start with Jill Biden being asked point blank on camera, hey, why doesn't your husband take a cognitive test?
Nikki Haley, one of the Republican candidates, is calling for mental competency tests for those politicians over the age of 75. What do you think about that?
Ridiculous.
Would your husband ever take one of those?
I mean, we would never even discuss something like that.
We would never even discuss something like that. Ridiculous, she says. She knew what was happening to her husband. She knew it, and she abused him for power. That abuse was clear and evident on stage after the most famous Joe Biden collapse, which was, of course, in the debate between him and Donald Trump, which is an amazing act by President Trump, an amazing act of holding back. Wasn't it that debate itself was remarkable to watch because the president decided to sit back and actually not completely obliterate Joe on live TV. True stoicism, true Christian stoicism was Donald Trump not mauling Joe Biden in front of the entire nation as Joe Biden just sat there and completely limped across the finish line. He couldn't even complete sentences. It was a real crisis. And how Jill Biden handled it afterwards shows you everything. Here we go.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Lie! Yes.
Just be very careful, men, who you marry. If this isn't the warning sign in the road as to why you shouldn't marry a woman who is a harpy leftist who is a cat lady. Like the imagery of Jill Biden screaming while Joe Biden just stands there being utterly abused by her, humiliating him live on stage. If that isn't a warning sign for you in life as to what you shouldn't want in your marriage, I don't know what is. Can we load that as a play beside, please? Yeah. It's just the perfect. Or maybe just play it again. Just play it again and pause it. Here, this is what I'm talking about right here.
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts. And let me ask the crowd, what did Trump do? Lied! Yes.
That's the future for anybody who marries these godless, soulless,
Joe, you did such
left-wing harpies, cat ladies. Ooh, it's brutal. When Jill Biden finally saw the collapse of this fraud and was forced to reveal the true nature of the cabinet that she was protecting, it devolved into her actually running cabinet meetings. Jill Biden was there in the final cabinet meeting that Joe Biden oversaw, which is just rough on the eyes. Check this out. This is Joe Biden. This is Joe Biden. This is Joe Biden trying to just make it through a cabinet meeting. And Jill seizing the moment and taking over. Joe can barely read off his script. And Jill is sitting there waiting and runs the thing for the next 30 minutes. It's brutal. Here we go.
I'm grateful that Jill is here today. Heard that clapping. It wasn't for me when we came in. And here across previous administrations, First Ladies have attended these meetings for specific reasons. This is the first time Jill has joined us, and it goes to show how important the issue is, which she's about to speak to the both of us. Today, at the top of our meeting, Jill's going to give an update on the House initiative, White House initiative, to fundamentally change the approach and the fund, how we approach and fund women's health services. So I'd like to turn it over to Jill and for any comments she has, and it's all yours, kid.
Thank you. You know, sometimes the White House surprises you.
And then Jill goes into a 30-minute scripted speech. It doesn't even look like Joe Biden at the end. Like he's so battered down. It's not love. Like this image, this isn't love. This is the image of abuse. This is the image of whinging for power. This is what Jill Biden was doing to Joe. And now, based on undercover video footage of the DNC vice chair that's been released, you can see quite clearly how this operation worked. David Hogg is the vice chair of the DNC. He was caught by Project Veritas, of course, in an undercover camera sting operation where he gave up completely the op to protect Joe Biden at the White House and said that not only was it Jill behind it, but it was Jill's chief of staff, a man named Anthony Bernal, who ran the protection mechanism and racket and was the Dark Lord of the White House. We have some very interesting information on Anthony Bernal. You're going to want to lock in for this one. Here we go.
Yes.
Nice to meet you, yeah.
Off the record, of course.
Foundational question for me is like, how corrupt is the DNC if so many people knew, or few people knew about Biden? Well, the president of the United States.
I mean, I think the fact of the matter is the DNC is always going to be like a campaign arm of the president, ultimately. The bigger issue was like the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it. And I came straight to you and know that Joe Biden's chief of staff had an enormous amount of power.
Joe Biden?
Joe Biden's chief of staff. That was like an open secret for them. Like, I would avoid them. Like, he was scary.
What was his name?
Anthony.
I've never seen him.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
He's just like a shadowy, like, Wizard of Oz type figure. That's what made him so, like, I knew how he looked. I'm like, the general public wouldn't know how this man looked. But he wielded an enormous amount of power, and I can't stress to you how much power he had at the White House.
Who is Anthony Bernal? Because we now have this on tape from inside of the DNC, somebody who's very high up at the DNC, that he was the man behind the full control racket and cover-up of Joe Biden. Anthony Bernal was actually one of the few people, one of 4 people that was there in Rehoboth Beach when Joe Biden decided to, probably under great duress, resign from the presidential race in 2024. Who is this dark arts Anthony Bernal? Let's go check his Wikipedia page. There's something that you'll learn in this business, which is that people who have nothing on their Wikipedia pages are particularly scary and are particularly evil, especially if you have such a high rank. Anthony Bernal is the senior advisor to the First Lady Joe Biden. He was the senior advisor from 2020 to 2025. Well, that's a pretty big position. What the hell is going on here? Why is his Wikipedia just 2 paragraphs long? It's actually 6 sentences. This doesn't make any sense. He graduated from this school in Arizona and then in Texas. He worked for the Obama and Clinton campaigns. Then he worked for Joe Biden's 2024 presidential campaign. He served as deputy campaign manager. That's it. That's all we know. So wait a second. He doesn't have any past? He doesn't have any background? We know nothing about him? He has no history? The deep state is run by guys like this. The deep state is run by people who, as described there by DNC Vice Chair David Hogg, are shadowy and scary and terrifying and are in the background and are the dark lords. This is crazy, man. So who is this guy? We know that he's been subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee. Joe Bernal was one of 4 aides present at the meeting at Joe Biden's house in Rehoboth Beach on July 18th, 2024, which led to Biden's decision to withdraw from the presidential election. I think we're going to see more on this guy. We were able to find one clip of him. Here's Bernal as Joe Biden's handler. He's effectively like marching Joe Biden around in a Waffle House after, there he is right there. You see him in the purple tie, marching Joe Biden around in this creepy Waffle House 2 a.m. visit after Joe Biden's complete collapse on the debate stage in the 2024 debate with Donald Trump. And you can see him there sort of lurking and pushing the Bidens as they stand awkwardly at the Waffle House. And let's see, where is he here? There you can see him kind of like over the shoulder. There with Joe Biden. Very interesting. James Comer says that Jill holds the keys to the full Joe Biden cover-up, which, of course, if you're running a president with terminal illness who is in total, complete cognitive collapse for president, that is the biggest cover-up in the history of the White House. It's far bigger than Watergate, and even Jake Tapper agrees with me on that one. James Comer says it all connects to Jill Biden, and it's Jill Biden who really needs to be brought in for questioning here. Here we go.
Start with the 4 people that you, in fact, are going to have transcribed interviews with, and the president's doctor, Kevin O'Connor. I would imagine there are a lot of other people you want to talk to, too, but let's start with these 5.
Yeah, well, obviously the physician, he's the one that continuously told America that Joe Biden was in tip-top physical condition. He was mentally sharp. He was physically sharp. We now know that to be 100% false. The 4 staffers, aren't well-known staffers. These 4 staffers operated behind the scenes. But while we're starting with them, Sean, we believe these are the staffers that were responsible for using the auto pen. Someone got documents and manually placed them in the machine and pressed the power button to sign Joe Biden's signature. That was not Joe Biden. That was done by staffers. That would be done by any staffer. So we believe and have good reason to believe these are the 4 staffers that were responsible for that. We want to ask them, who gave you the authority to use Joe Biden's signature? And we'll go from there. Obviously, we believe that some of the names, like the chief of staff and perhaps the first lady, were involved in a lot of the decision making. If that's where the trail leads, then we'll bring them in as well. But we're going to get answers to all the questions that every American deserves answers to.
If you're looking at this as a crime scene and you're asking, where's the evidence? Then look no further than Joe Biden's appearance on The View. Joe Biden's appearance on The View just last week, 2 weeks ago, is the key piece of evidence to show you where the abuse racket starts and begins and ends. Jill Biden, knowing full well that her husband was terminally ill with prostate cancer that has metastasized to his bones, meaning that he's had prostate cancer, a terminal prostate cancer, for has to be close to a decade. Talk to any medical professional on the left, right, or center. Jill Biden, knowing that her husband is fully incapable of normal human cognitive function at this point, trotted him out to what is still hysterically a pretty well-watched program on ABC, seen by between 2 and 3 million people per day, and forced Joe Biden to endure just the softest of softballs, which led to answers like this. Look no further than this clip to show you exactly how criminal this behavior is towards Joe Biden. You're nearing the point of almost feeling sorry for him.
Mr. President, since you left office, there have been a number of books that have come out, deeply sourced from Democratic sources, that claim in your final year there was a dramatic decline in your cognitive abilities. In the final year of your presidency, what is your response to these allegations, or are these sources wrong?
They are wrong. There's nothing to sustain that. Number one. Number two, think of what we were left with. We were left with a circumstance where we had an insurrection when I started. Not since the Civil War. We had a circumstance where we were in a position that the pandemic, because of the incompetence of the last outfit, end up over 1 million people dying. 1 million people dying. And we're also in a situation where we found ourselves unable to deal with a lot of just basic issues, and which I won't go into in the interest of time. And so we went to work, and we got it done. And one of the things and
Alyssa, one of the things I think is that the people who wrote those books were not in the White House with us, and they didn't see how hard Joe worked every single day. I mean, he'd get up, he'd put in a full day, and then at night I'd be in bed, reading my book, and he was still on the phone, reading his briefings, working with staff. I mean, it was nonstop. It's the White House. Being president is not like a job. It's a lifestyle. It's a life that you live. You live it 24 hours a day. That phone can ring at 11 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning. It's constant. You never leave it. And Joe worked really hard. I think he was a great president. And if you look at things today, give me Joe Biden anytime.
That's worth the invitation to come to the show.
Oh, okay. It's so dark when you want that, knowing that Jill Biden is fully aware that Joe has terminal cancer Joe can't complete simple questions like, what did you accomplish? Why did you suck so bad in the White House? Why do you suck so bad is what the question was. And Joe goes, well, COVID. Anyway, have you heard my father used to say, when you have a lunch pail, you got to pick yourself up by the backstrap. We don't have time. In the interest of time, I can't get into it. That's why yesterday, from the White House press dais, Carolyn Leavitt went full scorched earth flamethrower on Joe Biden specifically, and that clip from The View. She was asked, what are you guys going to do about this whole Joe Biden cover-up? He was asked by Peter Doocy at the White House, and Carolyn Leavitt didn't hold back. And I'm really glad, because it's time to bring this whole scandal public. This is the right moment, and this is the time when you could really have a reckoning. Go.
And on a different topic, there are some folks in President Biden's inner circle who are now in talks with Republicans in Congress to give interviews about how they may have handled President Biden's decline. Is the president satisfied with aides only sitting for these transcribed interviews, or would he also like to see some kind of testimony from the former First Lady, Dr. Biden?
I think, frankly, the former First Lady should certainly speak up about what she saw in regards to her husband and when she saw it and what she knew. Because I think anybody looking, again, at the videos and photo evidence of Joe Biden with your own eyes and a little bit of common sense can see this was a clear cover-up. And Jill Biden was certainly complicit in that cover-up. There's documentation, video evidence of her clearly shielding her husband away from the cameras. They were just on The View last week. She was saying everything is fine. She's still lying to the American people. She still thinks the American public are so stupid that they're going to believe her lies. And frankly, it's insulting, and she needs to answer for it.
She needs to answer for it. Ladies and gentlemen, somebody who often has the right answer on issues like this, the great Viva Frei, former litigator and full-time, very energetic pundit, joins the program live now to break this down and some of the major claims from Kash and Dan Bongino this week. Joining us live now. Viva, welcome back to the program. So what can possibly happen to Jill Biden here? We have yesterday on the program, Ron Johnson saying that I'm running the full commission to investigate this in the Senate, and I am going to be bringing Jill Biden in. Do you think they're going to get away with this?
I think they're going to get away with it. I don't think anything's going to happen, but there's a caveat to that. I'm not sure that everybody wants anything to happen where you can retroactively and retrospectively seek to undermine the actions of a president because of purported or, in fact, real cognitive deficits, because this will only be weaponized against Trump and against the right by these people who we now know are absolutely politically lawless. And they'll say, okay, good. Joe Biden will undo a couple of his pardons because of his cognitive inability to actually consent to those acts at the time. And lo and behold, we're going to declare that Trump throughout his administration was mentally unfit. And when they get back into power, use those very same tools to undermine everything Trump did. So, I don't think this is the road people want to go down legally. It's one thing to say that he didn't know that people were using the auto pen because that's just outright fraud. It's another thing to say that he wasn't cognitively capable of consenting to the use of the auto pen or the decisions that he was making because of his mental acuity or lack thereof. So I think it's a double-edged sword to pursue this too hard, because it will come back to bite the people who are pushing it in the butt when they lose power, or if and when they lose power, I should say.
So wouldn't it be illegal, though, if Joe Biden doesn't know that his name is being used to sign pardons? There are 8,000 pardons. If you were signing pardons 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months out of the year, you couldn't really fully get through 8,000 pardons if you just did that alone for your presidency. It's got to be just based on the pure data, Joe Biden did not have any knowledge of his name being signed to a considerable amount of the paperwork in his administration.
No, there's no question. And it's difficult to prove a negative. Like, how are you going to prove that Joe Biden didn't know about what was going on? But it can be proven. I mean, internal correspondence can show people, to the exclusion of Joe Biden, putting down pardons or whatever, executive orders to be signed by auto pen. We have, an indication, although I think that I forget the AIs are, what's his name, Sachs, accused Pocahontas of abusing of the auto pen to sign executive orders as relates to, was it either crypto or AO? I forget offhand, but it's one thing to say that so if you can prove it, it's outright fraud. It's like stealing someone's credit card, period. And it's a lot easier to steal an old senile person's credit card where they don't even know what the charges are. So if they can prove that he did not know and it was being done by people without the lawful authority, then yes, you've got a case for outright fraud. Where it becomes a double-edged sword that I'm not sure people want to pursue is to say he wasn't mentally capable of consenting, therefore let's undo these orders because consent was vitiated or consent was never there in the first place.
So what happens next? I mean, would you then look for all the documents to see who was actually running this operation? And then those documents would presumably have to be preserved, right?
Presumably. I mean, we're dealing with an administration that was corrupt to the core. A criminal enterprise was the Biden administration and what they did with all branches of government. So what's left of any evidence, you can't delete everything. And even deletion is evidence in and of itself. So, they'll hold some congressional hearings, maybe hope to find a smoking gun. There is certainly internal correspondence and text messages. One thing we've known is that however corrupt they are equally stupid. And when you have the Peter Strokes and the Lisa Pages of the world texting each other about their insurance policies to take down the president, they're stupid and brazen. So there is undoubtedly evidence there if there is a there. But, congressional hearings, let's see what they can find. It's a political good venue to go down because it highlights the corruption and the lack of the president for the last presidency. But legally, I don't know that we want to set the precedent that retroactively we get to declare someone unfit to have made the decisions that they claim to have made.
Right. If you have Robert Hur saying that, listen, I'm working for this president. He's currently the chief executive that I'm sworn in under. And I declare him to be unfit for trial. And if you bring that same guy before a Senate committee and ask, do you know who Ketanji Brown Jackson is? Hold up a photo and be like, do you even know who this lady is that you nominated to the Supreme Court? And it's like, I don't, is that corn pop? I think that you have I think you have a real problem on your hands here.
Well,
and I don't know what the I've never seen somebody pull are there rules against bringing presidents in under oath?
That I wouldn't venture a guess. I'd say before Joe Biden could identify Ketanji Brown Jackson, he'd have to, haul in a biologist. But Hur, in his report, the political spin is that Hur declared Biden unfit for trial. The reality is he said nobody would convict this old, senile, friendly old man. He's not a doctor. He wouldn't be in that position in the first place. But there is precedent to have had totally unfit, cognitively not there presidents, nonetheless, acting as president. So again, politically, it might be a good path to go down because it highlights the corruption of the administration. But legally, you want to start setting the precedent where the judiciary or Congress can start overturning the acts of the president. That's not going to end well, especially when they are preemptively and attackingly saying Trump is the one who's mentally unfit, when quite clearly that was never the case. So I would be careful there, how hard you push it and what you expect from it. Also, Hur never declared him medically unfit. Hur's not a doctor. He just said, he's a nice old man. No one would convict him, so let's not bring it to trial. Corruption to the core.
Yeah. So what happens next with this judiciary? It does seem to be that we're entering a very, very dangerous universe here where you don't even need a chief executive because the judiciary has usurped chief executive powers. The crisis has been brought about by the judiciary in this administration. Trump can't move. If he were to cure cancer, if he were to cure Joe Biden's cancer, a federal district judge would overturn it and would give Biden cancer again. If you were to end the war in Ukraine, a federal district judge would declare the war back on. And in fact, would give Iran nukes in order to nuke Israel or whatever, it's becoming a parody of itself, Viva. It's becoming the meme.
We talk about this, Robert Barnes and I, every Sunday, and it's not necessarily through the activism of the federal judiciary, but the inaction of the Supreme Court. They let the lower level activists get away with this. Jokingly, if Trump cures cancer, they'll convict him of practicing medicine without a license. If he ends the war in Ukraine, you'll have a judiciary saying, no, you got to reposition some troops there, because that's effectively what they're doing with the immigration activism that they're declaring that they must bring back into the country or facilitate bringing back illegal criminal aliens into the country because these judges don't have to live with them, although some of them apparently choose to live with them and have now gotten arrested for that. you're going to get the Supreme Court either acting or not acting. And if they act, they got to slap the lower levels back into submission, because it's true. The Supreme Court just overturned the Chevron decision, which sort of took away some of the power of the administrative bodies of the government. What you have right now is a federal judiciary that is acting as the interpreters of the law, the appliers of the law, and the law itself. They want to talk about having marshals even, but they're declaring what the executive can and cannot do, and usurping the executive authority by giving them the powers, giving themselves the power to interpret the law and then apply the law. So the Supreme Court has to get involved. If they don't get involved, what will happen is Trump is going to have to flip two birds to the courts and say, good, I'm not bringing these people back from foreign countries. I am not ending the tariffs, although that was overturned on appeal, and flip two middle birds to the lower level courts and say, come enforce your judgments against the executive. See how that goes. That's a constitutional crisis of sorts, but it's the constitutional reestablishment of the separation of powers. Because right now you have the judiciary thinking they are the executive and the legislative.
But you've seen this before, I guess, with Andrew Jackson. How did it work out in that presidency?
My recollection, I'm not a history major of America. I'm getting good. But my recollection is that he said, you've made these orders, now enforce them, good luck. And the reality is that they elected a president. The judiciary has the powers given to it by Congress. Right now, they are acting as a rogue extension or usurpation of the executive powers by telling the president what he can and cannot do as president, as relates to foreign affairs, as relates to what is effectively military issues. They're basically taking control of the country, and the Supreme Court has to get involved. They haven't, and they've empowered them to get away with it. But at some point, the hammer's going to fall. It'll either be the SCOTUS, or Trump will, say, "Thanks for your orders, disregarded."
Would the easy way out here be for the Supreme Court to rule that these district judges, their rulings can't apply nationwide? Is it against the national injunctions? Is this the major problem? That's the order that we're waiting for to come down before the end of the SCOTUS season. That would be the one to declare nationwide injunctions unlawful. I mean, period. The other thing would be to not have John Roberts cast doubt on the effectiveness of impeaching some of these rogue judges. These judges need to be impeached. They need to be investigated for civil rights violations. That was the reason why you had these laws in the first place. So you got Harmeet Dillon in there, who could start looking into these things. But they need to be impeached, and the Supreme Court needs to come down and, judicially speaking, smack these lower courts back into, not submission, but back into their positions in the first place, because right now they've been empowered to think that they are president. Yes. These nationwide injunctions, I just, from these dipshit judges that don't live in these backwaters, you're gonna run this country directly into the ground. It's not gonna work. It could be a non-functional country. Every president's going to endure this, and no president will ever be able to move. Trump is completely boxed in by this.
They're going to force the constitutional crisis, so to speak. It's not going to be much of a crisis. It's just going to highlight the separation of powers. The executive, Trump is going to say, all right, you've got a nice order there telling me that I can't impose tariffs on foreign countries. Piss off and enforce it. But like I say, the higher level courts maybe are coming around, and the Supreme Court needs to come around sooner than later. And if they don't, Trump is not going to take the law into his own hands. He's just going to take back the power that the people gave him.
It's very interesting that we're talking about this, and this is breaking just literal seconds ago, Viva. So let's react live to it. Supreme Court allows Trump to revoke legal status of 500,000 immigrants. Federal judge blocked the administration from immediately ending temporary status granted by the Biden administration to people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. This seems to be a return to form. Let's see. How did this shake out?
Is this in the context of the TPS, granting TPS?
Yeah.
Another amazing thing, you can grant TPS, temporary protection status, blanket wise, but you can only eliminate it or remove it on a case by case basis. That is creating.
You're going to be shocked. You're going to be shocked here. Hold on. I can't believe this. Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented in this decision. Wow. Viva. Wow. That's a real stunner there. Unbelievable. Oh, really? The DEI justice has once again DEI'd hard.
People think it's a conspiracy theory to say there's a plan to actively destroy America. And then you have judges saying, you cannot protect America. You can grant the invasion, but you cannot end the invasion. Or if you want to do it, you got to do it on a case-by-case basis. So you'll have 500,000 or more, it's millions really, individual hearings. It'll take 20, 30 years. And in that time, America has turned into a one-party state that will never be anything but. So the courts need to cut. It's good. I'm going to go read this afterwards and catch up for my own stream later in the afternoon. But a step in the right direction. I'm curious to read the dissent because that probably will be the most interesting element of this judgment.
So this must have been a 7-2 decision. It looks like. So you have Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson.
They're two of the biggest idiots on the Supreme Court. I mean, Sotomayor has proven herself to be mentally unfit. I don't know if
low
she's
IQ. Truly, yes. Maybe Jill Biden's her chief of staff. You just have to wonder.
Like you want to talk about purveyors of misinformation and disinformation. Sotomayor is the one, and she has a seat on the most powerful court in the most powerful country in the world. It's madness that these are the best justices who are giving the best reasons to understand that they are bona fide idiots.
Like we don't have a real so they're screaming due process. So it's amazing. They're screaming due process now. There's no due process when 20 million criminal aliens get marched into the country. Zero due process there. Zero due process when those criminal aliens behave like criminals, right? And then murder Americans. They get released from prison like immediately. There's zero due process for them when they get here and get absolute lavish fortunes from our welfare state and from the goodie bag that is created in the incentive structure here. There's zero due process when they're being flown in the dark of night. There's zero due process for anybody in East Palestine or in small Ohio towns that suddenly their entire town is taken over by Haitians that don't speak their language, that don't follow their customs, that have no connection to this land, that completely strip mine the place. I mean, listen, there's a criminal alien that was drunk off his ass and killed a woman and a child just like a couple blocks from here, drunk driving. They're completely disconnected. They're alien to this culture. They're alien to even our traffic rules, and they're slaughtering people. Zero due process. Zero due process. But now suddenly when you want to get rid of them, when you want to send them home where they belong, it's like everyone's screaming due process. It's why people think that it's a broken system. And I guess the ultimate question here is how long does the course remain legitimate? Because I've seen this happen with the FBI, Viva, and I've seen this happen with our corporate media, where you lie enough and you abuse the credentialism enough, then people are just going to get sick of it and say, I don't believe the courts. I don't trust the courts. I don't believe the courts.
Well, that is the biggest problem, is when people no longer can rely on the justiciable resolutions of their disputes in the court system. That's when they tend to, escape the court system. And now the problem is this. So everybody's crying due process, and they don't seem to be distinguishing. There are layers to due process. People who are not in a country illegally, who are in a country illegally or not there with the full rights of citizens, don't have the same due process rights as natural born citizens, naturalized citizens, or people with legal status. And so people talk about constitutional rights, where, constitutional rights to due process, fair trial, yada, yada. Illegals or, non-permanent residents don't have Second Amendment rights, and nobody cries about that. They don't understand that due process is a tiered system. You don't get to illegally enter a country to steal rights. I've been saying this for a little while. You cannot steal constitutional rights. If you're in a country illegally, your rights to due process are not that of a constitutional citizen. So they're just confounding the notion of due process to say anybody who's here that was granted a privilege by the government now has the due process rights of a natural born citizen for the government to take away that privilege that it gave them. So it's horse crap. It's something that only Sotomayor and Jackson could possibly argue.
You come here illegally, you loot the place. It's parasitic, quite frankly, in nature. It's not migration.
It's an invasion. It's an invasion. It's a predatory incursion. And what was going on in Ohio, we now know was corruption to the extent that they were there. You bring in people who don't speak the language so you can exploit them for cheap labor for big corporations. That's what was going on in Ohio and Springfield. We know it now. Yes. Oh, yeah, we needed them for factory jobs. No, you don't. There's unemployed people in Ohio. You brought in people who don't speak the language because they are easier to exploit. It's effective human trafficking conducted by the Biden administration. Now, you go home. Your temporary protected status, which was abusively given to you for corrupt purposes, is eliminated. That was your due process. You don't get the same due process as a natural-born citizen.
I want to switch topics here quickly to something that you've popped off on and gone a little viral on this week, which is this Epstein case and Kash and Dan coming forward and saying quite a bit. And I like the strategy here. Kash and Dan coming forward and saying, you know what, we're going to be very transparent about what we're doing at the FBI, and you should judge us by our work. This is something that Bongino said yesterday that, again, has kicked the hornet's nest of the internet, which is, listen, I have the tapes of Jeffrey Epstein not killing himself. Like, I have the tapes that prove that Jeffrey Epstein definitely didn't, but definitely did kill himself. Here's the clip, and I want to get your reaction to it. Oh, well,
I'm hearing it. I know what he says.
Yeah, we apologize. I guess it's well, ask ALX then, please. Either way, we've both seen it. So, what's your take?
Yeah, well, so important thing in the clip is he says, we don't have the video of the act itself, but it's video from within the MCC, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, that shows that he was alone in his room and there was no one else around. There's no other forensic evidence, et cetera, et cetera. There's two problems. Sometimes partial transparency leads to further conspiracy. And I'll say full disclosure, I know Dan. I like Dan. I've been one of the biggest cheerleaders for Dan both before and during. I don't know Kash quite as much, but we were very, very excited to have Kash and Dan there. Like, those are two of the, if you handpicked anybody to be deputy director and director of the FBI, it would be Kash and Dan. The problem is when you put out some information, it's gonna further other conspiracy theories. The question is, I've had the subsidiary theory, like, okay, if Epstein did it by his own hand, and when Dan comes out and says, look, I've got video, not of him doing the deed, but showing that he was alone, there was no one else there, and no one else could have done it, that's part of the conspiracy that a lot of people subscribe to, that Epstein was allowed to kill himself. How do you have the most wanted, the most politically relevant perpetrator in America at the time left alone 2 weeks after suicide watch with extra bed linens in his cell to take his own life, when you are there to make sure that he doesn't take his own life? So it's nice. I appreciate that. People are going to also be a little skeptical that there's video now, when we were told by the last administration that cameras malfunctioned and auto-deleted whatever evidence they had. So it will always raise more questions. The question is, from a PR perspective, how do you deal with this thorny issue? The other thing that I'm realizing now watching Dan is, he comes out and says, look, if any of you have any additional information, send it my way. We'll look into it, almost begging for an excuse to reopen whatever investigation he inherited from the previous corrupt FBI/administration. But taking Dan at his word, there's video that shows Epstein was left alone in his cell. There was no one else around. That is the conspiracy. How was Epstein left alone with extra bed linens 2 weeks after having tried to take his own life, immediately after having been taken off suicide watch by an unnamed psychiatrist? How was he given access to be alone, to kill himself? That's what we all want to know. If what Dan is saying is true, and nobody's going to doubt that what Dan is saying is true, would be tremendous. No one's going to doubt that. So, but it opens the door to the next level of the conspiracy theory.
So thank you for that follow-up. Here is the actual clip, and just one little point of discussion afterwards. Here we go.
Public interest. I'm just telling you what we see in the file. I just want to be crystal clear on this. I am not asking anyone to believe me. I'm telling you what's there and what isn't. Right. There is nothing in the file at this point on the Epstein case, and there's going to be a disclosure on this coming shortly. We are working through there is video. That is something the public does not. There's video of him killing himself. No, not the actual act, but the entire MCC Bay, there was only one camera. There's video that when you look at the video, and we will release, that's what's taken a while on this, we are working on cleaning it up to make sure you have an enhanced, and we're going to give the original so you don't think there were any shenanigans. You're going to see there's no one there but him. Right. There's just nobody there. So I say to people all the time, if you have a tip, let us know. But there's no DNA, there's no audio, there's no fingerprints, there's no suspects, there's no accomplices, there's no tips, there is nothing. If you have it, I'm happy to see it. There's video.
So this is a very interesting point, and it's a point that was backed up by Tucker Carlson. So, okay, if you're going to sit there and throw rocks at Kash and Dan, fine. We like Kash and Dan, and they've been friends of the show and have been on the show, and we know them to be trustworthy at the very least, and not to be idiots, right? You'd have to be very stupid to just come out and lie about these things, to reopen the cocaine case if it's going to lead nowhere, or the Dobbs case if it's going to lead nowhere, or January 6th if it's going to lead nowhere. That's a foolish move to just reopen that stuff. It'll make you look dumb, and I don't think that they're dumb people. I know them to not be dumb people. Tucker Carlson back in 2022 went and did this investigation and said nobody went inside or outside of the block, level 9 of the Metropolitan Detention Center, where Jeffrey Epstein was kept. So no one was going in or out because there were hundreds, if not thousands, of cameras that would have captured, let's say, an assassin team, right, that was sent in to kill him. So that Hillary Clinton walking in a pantsuit and 2-inch heels, cackling with a noose around, dragging on the ground, that we don't have on camera. It, however, doesn't preclude any interviews with the people that were on the cell block with Jeffrey Epstein. One of them, for instance, was a serial strangler, and was also like a Hulk-like thing-like bodybuilder.
I remember that picture. The guy looked like something out of a comic.
And nobody, according to Tucker's reporting, nobody interviewed anyone who was there with Epstein. And so what I would like to see is all of the available footage, and to see if were the cells left open? Could people go and murder? Could somebody go and murder Jeffrey Epstein? Could Jeffrey Epstein have paid someone to murder him? Meaning, like, if Jeffrey Epstein was told that you'd better get this done, or something worse is going to happen. I think there's still shades of gray here, potentially.
It's even a bigger problem than that, because first of all, it's been so long now that I ran a poll on Twitter. People are not even going to believe video if they see it. They're going to believe it's AI or CGI. So there's that problem.
Yeah, and Dan says we're fixing the video for you right now, and I'm like, don't say that.
We're living in a post-truth era. But let's just even take it at its face value. Epstein killed himself physically with his own hands. What Dan is saying is absolutely true. How is it allowed to happen? Because a LEHOP is as much of a conspiracy as a murder. So yeah, he was left alone in his cell 2 weeks after having been taken off, or immediately after having been taken off suicide watch, 2 weeks after having failed a suicide attempt, with extra bed linen in his cell, bed linens that are supposed to be thin as paper and not be able to support the weight of a body. And yet he's still, if we take it at face value, was able to kill himself. That's the conspiracy. Who was he talking to in the month or two leading up to his death? They record these lines. So even taking it at its face value, he did it to himself with the sheets that were in his bed, his cell. How the hell did that happen in the first place? That's the conspiracy. But the issue is, the problem is, like, it's not the partial disclosure. It's that it's really a PR thing. There are so many people. This is sort of like Sandy Hook level conspiracy now, where there's some people who are going to go out with the most outlandish, wacky conspiracy theories. You'll never be able to get to them. But there are people who will never believe that he killed himself. I personally don't. And I believe that even if he did do it by his own hand, but was allowed to happen, that qualifies as assisted suicide. And then the question becomes about the file. It's the biggest question, looking at the file that you've inherited from what we know to be a corrupt criminal organization. Literally, the FBI that they inherited is a Pandora's box of criminality. What faith does anyone, or ought anyone, have in that file that they're looking at? And then the question that I would have to them is, are they reinvestigating that file? Are they investigating the investigators, or relying on the findings of people whom we know to be criminal investigators, in the actual sense that they were investigators who were the criminals, not investigating crime?
Yes. I mean, we've looked extensively into this. Bill Barr, for instance, has a lot to hide here, as Bill Barr's father was the person who got Jeffrey Epstein's career started. And Bill Barr's father has very, very strange connections to Jeffrey Epstein.
They've got strange connections. They've got strange, literature proclivities. They're a bunch of freak perverts. This is the bottom line. If this was an extortion ring,
space relations. You ever read that? It's amazing. Like, when the people who actually have gone down the rabbit hole here.
Oh yeah,
Bill Barr's father wrote an entire book about how you can control the whole planet through predator pedophilia, and how an elite group of people can control, through abusing children. An elite group of people can control a whole planet through blackmail. They wrote it.
The problem is also that this, if it were in isolation and this were the only issue that Dan and Patel were talking about, it would be one thing. It comes on the heels of Pam Bondi saying, "I've got files that no one's ever seen. They're terrible." And then there's a big dud of the release that leads to sort of the embarrassment of the influencers who were attending there. Promises of disclosure of Epstein files, and now we're sort of here. So, it's people are getting maybe unwarranted, but they're getting frustrated, they're getting impatient, and they wanted certain results. There are certain litmus test issues here. The Epstein is one of them, and it's not something that people are going to forget about. But the main issue, these are follow-up questions that I would have had, is what file is Bongino and Patel relying on? If it's the findings of the criminal not James, it was Andy McCabe at the time. If it's the findings of the previous criminal FBI that we now know were actually hiding documents from the current FBI, how reliable is that file? Are they reopening an investigation into that file? And if Epstein did in fact kill himself, are they investigating how he was allowed, how that window of opportunity was afforded to Epstein at what's supposed to be the most secure prison on earth? And then you're going to have people who are just never going to believe any evidence because we live in a world where you can't even believe your own eyes when you see the video yourself.
I'm just not going to believe that a 4-foot bunk, you can snap your neck and break it in 3 different places. I'm just not
Someone
gonna
had
believe
mentioned
it.
to me, someone mentioned to me, if in hanging himself, he rotated upside down somehow, and then the rope pulls this way, then it could break the bones that are all, there's a medical side of it where they say that there were 3 broken bones somewhere in the neck that's more consistent with strangulation than hanging, because hanging goes up, strangulation goes down. If he somehow flipped upside down when he hung himself, I'd like to know. These are just questions that reasonable questions to ask. It takes a longer format to flesh this out for the concerns that people have, and when their concerns go unaddressed, people, it's like sort of, to some extent, it's a hockey game for people who don't personally know the people involved, and it turns on a dime, and if they don't get their way, they start booing, the inaction of the team. So the window of opportunity for results and the window of opportunity for answers that quell concerns as opposed to raise more questions, it's not an infinite open window, but we're dealing with people who I firmly believe stepped into this FBI and are blown away by the abject corruption of the institution itself, setting aside the dark nastiness of what they actually have to investigate on a day-to-day basis.
So, in conclusion here, I just want to step back and say Kash and Dan have done, I think, good work in trying to present a roadmap for what they're going after. Russiagate and the cover-up there. We're already starting to see small disclosures on that, like Nell Orr, Bruce Orr lying under oath to the Senate. We're seeing, obviously, Dan Bongino say, I'm going to go after January 6th, the pipe bomber. I'm going to go after the cocaine at the White House. I'm going to go after the leaks, illegal leaks from the Supreme Court that was intended to get Supreme Court justices killed and change the rulings of the court. I think those are all really, really good. How damaged is the FBI? How unfixable is this, Viva? Meaning, to just trying to dovetail to hook into your last point. Like, will people ever believe it, right? Like, will people believe it even if Kash or Dan come out with it?
That's the biggest problem in all of this, and that's what would have been one of my follow-up questions to Patel when he did it was either the Bartiromo or the Brett Baer. How fixable is the FBI? Kash seems to have a lot of faith in the rank and file. I don't think Americans as a whole have faith in the rank and file. They see them as being the ones who are doing the dirty work for the corrupt elites. The rank and file, the Kevin Kleinsmiths who falsified documents and submitted to a FISA court. Nobody has any faith in the institutions as a whole. Can they fix the FBI, and do they think they can fix the FBI? I'm not sure that I personally think they can. They're doing their best, and maybe they are implementing policy that's going to weed out the activist, bad faith actors by sort of, changing where people work, maybe closing down the J. Edgar Hoover office. Maybe it's going to weed out the bad faith actors by natural selection, and they can do it more casually and less obviously. But that's the question. Is anybody going to believe anything that comes out of the FBI unless they start seeing James Comey arrested? I mean, that doesn't come from the FBI, but are they going to have faith in the absence of any concrete decisive action? And this is one where, like, I'm not sure. This is where clarify who has the authority to charge James Comey. The FBI,
the DOJ. The DOJ, right?
Some people do suggest that it might be Secret Service. The FBI does have charging powers. Bottom line, we know they broke the law. James Comey's latest 8647 stunt being one of them, where he even in his book expresses the mens rea of the act that he denies having done. Charge him. When people start seeing the bigwigs getting charged, the McCabe's not getting paid but getting charged, and people going to jail or at least facing charges, instead of what we see to be consistent continued cover-ups, like with the P. Diddy trial, which I believe is a cover-up in and of itself, the faith will be restored. Until then, admittedly, Bongino and Patel are in an impossible situation where it's going to be impossible to satisfy all of the concerns. And some people are going to say reopening the Koch investigation and the Dobbs leak, nobody cares about. The Dobbs might be more relevant in that if it leads to an impeachment of a biased judge, it might have some political use at the end of the day. The cocaine case could care less about, but January 6th pipe bombers, we need to see concrete results and arrests and exposure of the corruption that we know is there. And that's what people are, begging for from Bongino and Patel. And hopefully we get it sooner than later, because people are fickle and patience. Their patience is thin, but I don't think they understand the monumental Pandora's box of corruption and decay that Bongino and Patel have walked into at the FBI.
Arresting Comey would do so much. It really would. And Comey walked himself right into it. Nobody forced him to do that. Saying, hey, we have the shells. DNA of James Comey is on the shells. James Comey clearly set up this message. He did it. He blamed his wife. He lied then to the public. He lied under oath. And we're going to charge him. And this would be the most important. That would be such a pressure release valve for people in this country who've been following this.
And by the way, I have no doubt that he also deleted and probably obstructed if there is an investigation going on with him. And for anybody saying Viva's, the Canadian schnook who doesn't respect First Amendment rights, you can't threaten people. And for people to say, oh, it's not really a threat. Comey knew that it was a threat because his stupid book, which is called FDR Drive, is about a far-right extremist who pushes the limits of First Amendment protections to name his political rivals and call for something to be done to them, and his fans do, causing violence and killing their political rivals. That was his post after the 86-47.
Wow.
So nobody's going to tell me he didn't know what he was doing and that he lacked the mens rea and it's going to be a difficult case to build. I built the case. You can charge him now. Let him get acquitted at the end of the day after we discover whether or not he actually deleted any evidence off his phone of him setting up those shells that he happened to stumble across and throwing his wife under the bus. The man is the scum of the earth and he needs to be charged yesterday because if they are investigating the copycat threats that are resulting from this, you go after the big dog for the copycat threats and you'll find a lot less copycat threats when you go after the big dog for his dog whistle.
The reason why we took this so very seriously, and if it was a grandmother from Youngstown, Ohio, it would be different, but James Comey clearly has splinter cells, black ops groups, people who owe him favors, people that are allowed to carry badges and guns around Donald Trump. This is a deeply serious threat. This is a deep operator inside of the deep state. This guy will probably for the rest of his life be able to have crack teams in Secret Service and an FBI that owe him favors because he's done 30 years there, that he's helped covered up their crimes or back and forth. And so when he's calling for an assassination of Donald Trump, like this, you have to take that deadly seriously.
People try to pull up old posts of other people from the internet and say, look what they said. They said 86-46. First of all, I do say you're faffoing when you do that, even when it's with Biden. But the people that had done that in the past, it was quite clearly a reference throwback to Gretchen Whitmer, who put 86-45 out there. And so tongue in cheek, crap posting on Twitter, it's ill-advised. But it's not the same thing as the former director of the FBI posting it after a picture of him reading his book and before a picture of him summarizing what his book is about, naming his political rivals and calling for something to be done to them. The mens rea is there. The actus reus is there. There's probable cause. Charge him. Let him defend himself on free speech rights.
Because you brought up Diddy, final question here. Why is James Comey's daughter allowed to continue a trial against, Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Diddy? What exactly is going on here? There are no coincidences in life?
There's no good excuse for it, period. Maybe the argument is you can't fire her. Some people were hypothesizing that James Comey's 86-47 stunt was to make his daughter fireproof, because if they fired her then, it would look like retaliation. The bottom line, I don't know Bondi. I don't know her personally. I didn't have any preemptive faith in her because I didn't know her like I knew Bongino and what I know of Patel. It's inexcusable. There's no good excuse for it. Period. That you have Maureen Comey, James Comey's daughter, working on the Diddy file. And from what I understand, not necessarily running the best prosecution ever. The prosecution that they're running, limited to 2 defendants, his sex trafficking. Again, it's like Epstein only sex trafficked for his own personal pleasure. The cameras that were set up in Diddy Mansion apparently were only for his own sex video freak-offs for his own personal satisfaction. Horse crap. She should not be on that case anymore. It's corruption to the core. And it's inaction like that will cause a lot of people to distrust the Bondi and the current administration, because there's no good excuse for it that I know of.
Right. Why would you allow Lee Harvey Oswald's kid to work in the next Kennedy administration? Why would you let John Hinckley work for Ronald Reagan? I don't, it doesn't make any sense. It makes zero sense. Why would Donald Trump hire Matthew Thomas Crooks's, sibling or father?
The argument's going to be it's the past administration. She has a job. Maybe there's some rules for dismissal. But the bottom line is you cannot have the Trump administration pursuing Biden-era policies or Biden-era personnel on key issues. And this is one of them. I have yet to see a good excuse for why she's still prosecuting Diddy. And And my running theory is that the prosecution of Diddy is the cover-up itself, because he'll get convicted on crossing state lines with a prostitute or something. He'll go to jail for 10 years. It wraps up nice and clean, much like Ghislaine Maxwell. And lo and behold, we've got a blackmail, sex extortion, sex trafficking ring, and it was only for Diddy's personal satisfaction. I believe that as far as I can throw Thor's hammer.
So it's a cover-up for the deep state. It's a cover-up for an intel op.
That is my current opinion. I am open to being convinced otherwise, but it looks and smells like a persisted cover-up.
Persisted cover-up for a deep state op, for the same thing, for the Jeffrey Epstein of the music industry.
Yeah, there might be more, more politicians heading to these freak-offs, and it's a timely cover-up. We know his orbit is not arguably more expansive than Epstein's, but his orbit was politically and socially relevant, and we know none of it. Cassidy and Jane Doe, that's what we know right now.
Yeah, and his sex slaves are saying that Barack Obama was connected and Hillary was connected. He's on a deposition, which is wild. You can watch it. His name's Jonathan Odie. And then his bodyguards are saying that there are A-list politicians on these tapes, and we're going to see none of it. We're
going to see none of it, and they're going to convict him on some nonsense. He'll go to jail for a bit. Ghislaine Maxwell sitting in relatively decent conditions. She hasn't Epsteined herself yet, and then it disappears, and we move on.
Goodness gracious. Let's do a whole special on that, Viva. I would really like to break all that down.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see how this trial ends. And for now, just so everybody understands, I'm not in my studio because I'm in Georgia for there's something called a Soldier's Journey Home, which is a charitable organization that builds a forever home for a disabled veteran. And I was invited down by one of the guys working on it to document and do the ribbon cutting, which is tomorrow, or not do it, but to attend. So I'm on the road, and we're going to go see. They build a house from foundation to finished, keys in the door, in 2 weeks for a disabled veteran. It's amazing. A Soldier's Journey Home, everybody.
Incredible. You can follow along Viva in these adventures on Viva's social media, where he's rounded the corner on 750,000 followers. Let's help him get to that 1 million. Nobody deserves it more. Viva Frei, 750,000 subscribers. You must be one of them. His legal opinions ring like a bell. Right now, Mike Davis is out crying, like very jealous, very upset.
And sometimes I swear a little bit too much on Twitter, but everyone has their vices.
Thank you, Viva.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed that I missed my Blackout Coffee this morning. I'm currently out. I'm currently out of my Blackout Coffee. And I talked to my wife about this. I said, this must never happen again because I need my caffeine. And also, and what's more important, is I refuse to drink communist Marxist coffee from Seattle. I won't do it. I won't do it. I won't wear Nikes. All right? Because I'll never wear a Nike again because they paid Colin Kaepernick $30 million to kneel for the national anthem. I won't do it. And I won't drink communist coffee from Seattle. Blackout Coffee is the only coffee for me. Blackout Coffee is a coffee built with hard work and grit right here in the great state of Florida. I know their owner. I know how hard they work and how they have built this company from nothing. And they're not grifters. They're not going to come out and suddenly change their opinions or their values because of the political whims like other cucked and embarrassing and cowardly coffee companies. Ladies and gentlemen, Blackout Coffee is just damn good coffee. It's for hardworking people. It tastes great when you drink it black. That's the way that I have my coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, it's made by the right people and for the right reasons. If you believe in hard work and American values and coffee that actually tastes good, straight out the pot, go to blackoutcoffee.com/Benny. They have a ton of different coffee options, no matter how you like your coffee. Chilled, cold, in a can. Use code Benny for 20% off your first order. Support the American dream. Drink Blackout Coffee, blackoutcoffee.com/Benny. Stop settling. Start drinking real coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, somebody who's been the realist for the very long time with the Trump family and inside of the Trump administration has been Lynn Patton. She's the deputy assistant to Donald Trump and the director of minority outreach for the White House, and she joins us live now. Lynn, welcome back to the program. Wonderful to see you. There from inside of the White House, I see.
Yes, great to be here, Benny. Thanks for having me.
What a week for you. Man, Donald Trump has been slinging pardons and has been really changing dynamically the landscape. I have to assume, given your portfolio here, the pardon of quite a few famous rappers and quite a few famous people. You've had a very busy week.
Absolutely, Benny. And, Alice Johnson is on fire, and so is the president. But I'd be remiss if I didn't take 1 second to just extend our condolences to the family of our great friend, Bernie Kerik, on his passing last night. It was truly tragic. I had heard he was actually getting better, so it came as a true shock to a lot of us. And we wish him and his family all the best. But it's been quite a productive week at the White House. Some of my very good friends were on that pardon list. I know that the attention is largely on the Chrisleys, Todd and Julie, who absolutely deserved nothing less. I know that that's been getting some controversy from the mainstream media. But what people need to understand is that they were actually never convicted of tax evasion. We all believe in justice, but we believe in equal justice. And I don't need to tell you that the Trump family obviously has been a target of prosecutorial misconduct, the weaponization of the DOJ, but so were the Christies. This prosecutor actually had her father's face on a dartboard. There are ex parte emails between the judge and the prosecutor that cross all ethical boundaries. There was an IRS agent who said under oath that they owed them nothing. There was another FBI agent who I believe testified that they actually didn't even tell the truth in the trial and ended up retiring shortly thereafter. So these are factors that all came into play when Donald Trump was considering who deserved a pardon and who didn't. And again, their sentence was extremely harsh given what they were accused of. 14 years for a financial crime is out of this world, and then also we had the pardon of Larry Hoover, who founded the Gangster Disciples in Chicago, one of the oldest and, obviously most dangerous Black gangs in the inner city there. But he has turned his life around. And despite being in solitary confinement for nearly 30 years, he's actually written books. He's done a lot of testimonials from inside. He's helping others make good decisions. He's disavowed his association with that gang. As has Harry O. Harris, Michael Harry O. Harris, who Snoop Dogg actually advocated for several times during the campaign and the administration. He was the co-founder of Death Row Records. We gave him a pardon. We gave Duke Tanner, who is one of the advocates for AFPI and one of their spokespeople, gave him a full pardon. He had never been arrested before. One time, a drug charge, was in jail for the rest of his life. These are nonviolent offenders who really deserved a second chance, and that's what Donald Trump is all about.
So hold on, Lynn. This is very curious to me.
Yeah.
So you're talking about tax crimes. You're talking about illicit drug use. You're talking about operating criminal entities. This seems like something that we have demonstrable evidence of Hunter Biden doing. I'm very curious that he was never charged.
Exactly. Don't get me started because, I always say that if Don or Eric were doing crack cocaine on live video, the outcome would not have been the same. And we all know that, first of all, they would have been looping it on a public access channel 24/7, and they absolutely would have had the book thrown at them. So, equal justice is what we expect, and equal justice is what you're going to see in the Trump administration.
Well, spectacular. This clearly is something that very much frustrated voters, particularly Black men, when Kamala Harris was running and, cackling about smoking weed and how fun it was. And yet she blocked up hundreds of thousands of young Black men in California for doing the same thing. Joe Biden on the Senate floor talking about mandatory minimums for crack cocaine usage and how judges don't have a choice. They must lock you up for using crack cocaine. And his son is on camera, as you said, smoking Mount St. Helens levels of cocaine, of crack. He filmed it. He filmed it. It's like,
the hypocrisy is real. And, we saw Obviously, Obama lecturing black men on the fact that they should vote for Kamala Harris and accusing them borderline of being misogynist if they didn't. This was an absolute slap in the face. And, you know, what we saw during the election were minorities coming out in record numbers, you know, historic number of Hispanic, historic number of blacks, historic number of women, historic number of Jews. And, you know, there's a reason for this. When you abandon the priorities of the American voter, then don't be surprised when they abandon you in return. And at the end of the day, minority voters are just like any other American. They just want to be able to put food on their table, gas in their car. They want to be able to get a solid education for their kids, and they want to be able to live in a safe neighborhood. And those were the issues that Trump prioritized. And those were the issues that we continue to prioritize in this administration.
Well, it's nice to see now in retrospect, because we went to Atlanta. We went to Fannie Willis's district, in fact. We went to a place where Fannie Willis is in charge. And we handed out MAGA hats. And we had like hundreds, and they were gone.
I love it.
In like 15 minutes.
And
we just stood in the street.
That's incredible.
In Chick-fil-A that Donald Trump famously went to after getting his mugshot. And we just sort of stood there. And it's a rough part of Atlanta. And I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it just, those MAGA hats went like hotcakes. I just couldn't believe it.
I see that. And that's epic. And that's great because, you know, first of all, Black Americans have supported this man for decades. There's tons of R&B songs about Trump. You know, having been with Donald Trump for over 18 years, I can assure you that, you know, nobody supported this man more than sort of the rank and file of New Yorkers. When he would walk down the sidewalk in Manhattan, you know, it's the taxi drivers, it's the construction workers, it's the police officers, it's the firefighters that were always screaming out, "Yo, Trump, we love you, you know, keep up the great work." This does not surprise me at all that we've come full circle with respect to his fan base and his supporters.
So are you seeing the support increase? We're seeing record numbers. We're seeing record numbers from Rasmussen for right direction, wrong direction. We're seeing record numbers with young men, particularly young Black men. What do the internals look like right now?
The internals are showing the same exact thing. And, you know, one of the surprise sort of hidden issues that really garnered a lot of support was the indoctrination of kids in schools. And also men and women's sports. You know, that was something that Hispanics came out against in droves. Black men came out against in droves. You know, nobody wants to go send their kid to school and have them come back saying, you know, that they could be a boy, a girl, a cat, a dog. You know, there were literal litter boxes in some of these elementary schools in case that's how you identified. You can't make this stuff up, you know, and so to be able to go to these parent-teacher school boards and be told that you have no say in how your children are being raised was something that minority communities just could not wrap their heads around, and they came out and voiced their opinion about that, and they continue to do so.
How about the numbers with Hispanics, given the amount of deportations? We've heard a lot of this out of the this week, a lot of news this week about ramping up ICE deportations. We saw a mass deportation here in the state of Florida, in Tallahassee, probably the biggest one I've ever seen in my life. Hundreds of criminal aliens were obviously taken into custody. How are the numbers looking there? Do naturalized or legal citizen Hispanic voters, how are they reacting to this?
Well, I was just about to make that same differential because, you know, when you're here the right way and when your parents come here the right way and you're a law-abiding, tax-paying, legal immigrant, you are actually one of the most staunch supporters against illegal immigration. You know, it's something that makes everybody look bad. You know, illegals file into our communities, take all our jobs, our wages, soft skill jobs, things that obviously the American workforce is at one of its lowest points in American history. You know, more than 7 million workforce-aged Americans are out of the workforce for whatever reason. And we want to work hard to turn that number around, get them back in the workforce, make sure we're manufacturing here in the United States. The American First investment policy has done tremendous wonders for that, and we're bringing more manufacturing, more commitments in this country. And one of the things that I want to start pivoting and focusing on as Director of Minority Outreach is making sure that we go to companies like Apple, like DeMac, like, obviously Foxconn, like Oracle, like Amazon. And we say, look, you're committing to investing billions of dollars in this country, and we're so grateful. Now let's talk about a mentorship program. Let's talk about workforce tracks to get people back involved, to get people employed and working in America, and making sure that, those jobs go back to the Americans who are born here and who come here legally.
Yeah, this is clearly exploitative labor, which is what people are arguing for, right? Now it's kind of wild to hear, but we have clips of everyone from Jerry Nadler to Nancy Pelosi being like, "Who's gonna pick our vegetables?" Jasmine Crockett, who I'm sure is a favorite of yours. I'm sure, like the two of you go to drinks.
Her.
Yeah,
Jasmine Crockett of blank is what I call her, but yeah.
So the two of you get Cosmos together. Like, she just recently went viral for like saying we're not, we effectively we're not going to farm anymore, saying black people won't farm anymore, and that this is why criminal aliens are required in this country, which seems one, you're just making the argument for
number one, right?
Well, it's incredibly racist, and there are black farmers, and but also like it's encouraging exploitative, under the table labor that's dehumanizing. Right. Yeah,
that's right. In fact, I just saw a great interview with J.D. Vance, our amazing vice president, where somebody was literally saying to him, "How are we going to build houses if there's no illegal immigrants?" And he goes, "Wait a minute, are you saying that we have to keep our borders open so that we build homes in America?" Again, it's about re-stimulating the workforce that is here, over 7 million, like I said, age appropriate workforce males who are out of jobs, making sure that, yes, we build in America, we give competitive wages, and maybe that makes things cost a little bit more, but I'm almost positive that everybody's willing to do that for their own patriotic, responsibility. And, it's about also incentivizing these companies to stay here, giving construction companies and manufacturing companies tax breaks, tax benefits, rolling back regulations, making it more advantageous for them to build here, to stay here in this country instead of going overseas. And that's exactly what this president's doing. He's making sure that the big, beautiful bill gives them the tax cuts and the deregulation that they need to make sure that when they do spend more and pay these workers more money, that they're getting benefits on the back end and keeping their costs low and their overhead low. And that's how you bring Make America Great Again.
I know that we're up against a hard out, Lynn, but I just can't help myself. It looks like you're very close to or potentially in the White House library as we have been relitigating this whole cocaine found in the White House problem. We went through the original reports, and the cocaine baggie was found in the White House library.
Yes.
And I think that's where you are right now, potentially. And so, and we have a map here. So can you please explain to us, how hard would it be to actually get a bag of cocaine in the White House library? It seems like this would be very difficult.
It would be absolutely impossible. And one of the things that when this incident happened, I spoke to the boys about, and Laura Trump, anybody who's come into this White House, particularly for an event, or particularly even myself, every morning, even though as a deputy assistant to the president and an all access badge and a hard pin, I still have to put my bag through a mag machine. I still have to get wanded. That's every day in and out of the White House. And so the only way you could actually get cocaine into the White House is if you were on the outside of the gates and maybe met up with Joe Biden and his motorcade at an event or a different location, and then physically rode in the motorcade with the president into the West Wing. And so that would limit the amount of potential suspects to either his immediate senior staff, and I mean like chief of staff level, say senior staff, or a family member. There is no way that any other staffer or any other person or any other visitor could have ever brought cocaine into the White House. And so that narrows the potential culprits down pretty significantly. And it also obviously makes it even more evident that this is somebody who is extremely close to this man and extremely close to the president of the United States, which is equally as scary. Yeah. And, Benny, I don't have to tell you, as somebody who struggled with substance abuse and addiction myself, the Trump family gave me a second chance. They staged an intervention in 2012, literally a very tear-filled, emotional time where Eric Trump called me into his office and said, we know what you're doing. You're better than this. You're like a sister to us. And my first reaction was to deny and say I didn't know what he was talking about, that I haven't used cocaine in years. And, whoever's telling him this is just a liar and blah, 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 because that's what addicts do. They lie, they cheat, they steal. And so I look up and, tears are streaming down Eric's face. And that's when, I lost it. And I was just like, you're absolutely right. I need help. So, the fact that there's somebody clearly in the Biden inner circle who needs help and they're not giving it to this person, or they're not willing to confront this person and make sure that they are getting the help that they need, is also equally disappointing to me personally, on a personal level, because I know how the Trump family reacted to me, and I know how whoever this person is needs to be caught, held responsible, but also helped. They obviously have a very sick problem. If you can't go a couple of hours without having cocaine when you're in the White House, you are a serious addict. So the fact that you're infiltrating and bringing your addiction into the West Wing is something that's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you really look at it, what's happening right now with Dan Bongino, the FBI, is he's trying to undo a cover-up. Not only are they allowing it to happen, but they're encouraging of it, and then letting them all, letting the whoever the addict is, we have a clue, we have a suspicion. Don't go dusting for fingerprints in the library you're in right now, Lynn. Yeah,
exactly.
You probably would do better. You could probably do better work.
Some of these books, see if there's any more in here.
Yeah, that's right. You could do better investigative work than the former Secret Service, right?
Exactly. For them to say that it led to nowhere is just inexplicable. I mean, they definitely have fingerprints. They definitely know who it belongs to.
Yeah, they said they had positive DNA hits. And
exactly.
If you're putting your nose in a bag of cocaine, you're going to leave DNA there. Anyway, we're not trying to make light of it. I think it's. No. I didn't actually know that about your background, Lynn. That's utterly fascinating. Very powerful story.
Yeah. No. And Eric actually hates it when I tell that story, because he's like, I don't remember the crying part, and I'm like, oh, you absolutely did. I said that's what actually, encouraged me to confess to you. So it's actually a very sweet part of the story, but he thinks it makes him look like a wimp. But I disagree wholeheartedly.
The difference
makes him look like he has a heart.
The difference in how inhumane it is to cover up, whether it be terminal cancer with Joe Biden, with yourself, or to cover up someone's addiction and not get them to seek help. And sometimes to seek help, like, you have to have a consequence, right? There has to be consequences.
That's right.
It's like you brought cocaine into the White House, you have little dime bags stored everywhere, and you need to now you're going to be your career is over, right? Because you did this.
Yeah.
And that's just a consequence, and we love you still, but it's a consequence of what you've done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And which is why, a lot of people who know the president know that he lost his brother to addiction. So when he gave me a second chance and not only kept me at the Trump organization, but came down the escalator, ended up winning, won, and asked me to move with him to DC, the first admin, and obviously in the second one, it's just entirely humbling. And it's the honor of a lifetime to be a part of this administration and a part of have a front row seat to this family for as long as I have.
Well, just make sure that you're dusting for Kamala Harris or Hunter Biden or Ashley Biden's fingerprints in that room. I'm sure you'll do great.
Absolutely will.
We know you got to do with the investigation yourself, sadly, these days. That's how it works. Lynn,
absolutely.
Please come back anytime. We love having you on the program. But you've been a friend of us for such a long time, and you just
I will, Benny. It was great to see you here in the White House last week for the Maha event.
Maha,
with you
baby.
And your beautiful wife and newborn child. Congratulations again.
100,000 plus Americans follow Lynn right here on X. Make sure that you're one of them to get great insights behind the scenes and some pretty heartwarming stories about who the president truly is. Lynn Patton, everyone.
Thanks, Benny.
Godspeed. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are rocking and rolling. A reminder that we are going to be live for Donald Trump's, he says he's going to have a massive press conference with Elon Musk in the office. Elon Musk, according to J.D. Vance, is not going to be going anywhere. Hey, Alex, can we grab that clip, by the way? J.D. Vance saying Elon's not going anywhere. He's going to stay a direct advisor to what we're doing. I commented when Elon said he's done with DOGE or he's stepping away from DOGE that he's the only government employee I've ever been sad to see leave. Ever. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go to Ask Benny Anything, something that we do every single Friday. A lot of good energy. A lot of good energy these days. We're really excited about what we have coming up in the future. Please, I promise you, stay locked in. So here we go. Are we going to do yeah, okay, great. Hey, Benny, how about a Christmas ornament? No, guys, we got to do the in the chat stinger. Got to do the in the chat stinger. This is my favorite new stinger that we've built. I almost forgot it. We didn't have a show last Friday, so gonna make sure we play it twice. Here we go. Jeff Gibson, hey Benny, how about a Christmas camel ornament this year? Yeah. Let's do it. Let's freaking do it. I will. We'll do a whole suite of Christmas ornaments this year. We have some big things cooking. We're already planning Christmas right now, and it's just the very end of May. I think this is the second to last day of May. Shannon Wells says excited for Turning Point event in the Tampa area. Can the Benny Brigade get a discount on tickets? Love you guys, says Shannon Wells. Yes, we're going to have a discount code for the general admission to the event, Student Action Summit in Tampa. There's going to be tens of thousands of great activists right here, right down the street from where we will be giving studio tours to Benny Brigade members. It's going to be awesome. You can come here and actually see the full Benny studio. You can sign up right now. Use code Benny for 25% off general admission. This is July 11th through 13th in Tampa, Florida. We're also going to be throwing a party in Tampa, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. It's going to be our own Benny party. So we're going to be able to meet you. We would love to meet you. There's going to be some massive VIPs there. It's going to be very exciting. So get ready. Lock in. Be in this area on July 11th through the 13th. Ton of great speakers you can see here on the speaker slate. You have Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Don Jr., Charlie Kirk, obviously, and a lot more to be announced. Get ready. It's going to be a great time. Here we go. From Juiced. What up, Juiced? Do you think countries all around the world are starting to react with an anti-woke movement, maybe towards safeguarding their own original cultures? Absolutely, Juiced. This is something that you can see on the margin. Almost every nation, globalism has completely and totally failed. And countries that don't protect their own culture are going to get railroaded and bulldozed by stronger nations. You have to protect your own culture. It's paramount to protecting your own people, but also more importantly, the own stability of your country. If you dilute your population and dilute the culture that built your nation, then you will get railroaded by a China or a Russia or a United States of America, right? Like and do you want, no, I want America to be strong. This is what America First is all about. Like I want America to be America. I don't need the rest of the world to be America. I like America just where it is. And I want this nation, it's funny, we roasted a Senator, Chris Murphy, this morning. He put up on, grab that tweet, please. It's on my timeline. He put up on, he's like, why can't we build nice bridges here in America anymore? Says Chris Murphy of Connecticut. And he like has some old, he has some old dilapidated, like falling to piece, iron bridge there in Connecticut. And I responded like, well, because jackass, you voted to send $300 billion to destroy Ukraine. You called everybody a Nazi who disagreed with you. This is why we can't build beautiful things in our country, because we're so obsessed with trying to control the whole rest of the world. Why don't we focus on here first? There's a lot of problems in America. There always will be, always has been. So why don't we focus on this country first? Why can't we build beautiful things anymore? Shut up. These people. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we will be live for the bombshell Donald Trump, Elon Musk, the Elon Musk Donald Trump buddy comedy show in the Oval Office later this afternoon. Please, if you wish to give us a free present, sign up for our RSS feed. Make sure that you are ensuring that we can have the strongest possible presence in the future. We're growing this thing out. We're growing the show out and this brand and this company for the next 20 and 30 years. We want to be able to be a dominant force and a very powerful force. And we're already seeing very positive effects on our country for asking the right questions, applying the right pressure, and bringing the right topics to light. Again, you're looking at the guy who asked the first question about Epstein. That's Bam Bondi. Kind of, it's on some level, it's all of our fault, right? Like, we were the first people to start this ball rolling. Please subscribe to our RSS feed on whatever platform you get your podcasts downloaded. This is something that will help us build and grow, and we thank you for that. Our verse of the day today from Matthew 6:34. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Isn't that a profound and beautiful verse, especially to go about this news cycle in? I find myself, do you find this? Do you find yourself waking? I think this happens to every human being. You wake up in the middle of the night and your mind's racing about certain things. There's something that's bothering you. There's something that's problematic. These are it's very, for me at least, it's not helpful to sit there and try and brick that all out in the middle of the night. For me, that's not the peace of God descending upon me. This is something that's, not good. Keeps you awake, destroys your sleep. And when you're a parent, 4 little kids, you need all the sleep that you can get. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Don't worry about tomorrow. God's got us. On to victory. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to win. It's always been it always and forever will be a massive honor to be able to do this program, to do these interviews. We're getting so many big-time requests. We have so much big stuff that we have cooking here. It's really an exciting moment, and we're going to seize the day. It's, got some big announcements to make. Our girl Monica Crowley with America 250. We're going to be doing a lot of work with the White House. We're going to be doing a lot of work with bringing you the front seat to the golden era. We've already had a ton we had the White House just live on our show from inside of the Hunter Biden crack room at the White House Library. Whatever, it's like our obligation is very simple. We're going to bring you along with us, and we're very, very proud to do that. This is a show built by you, for you, and we march with you on to victory. It's your boy Benny. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be live in 2 hours. See ya.
Billionaire Elon Musk, recently appointed to President Trump's cabinet as Transportation Secretary and Border Czar, is now he is rounding up asylum seekers like cattle into his rocket ships. He calls them illegal aliens. The problem is the rockets keep exploding.
Well, I, for one, am glad that dog is out of the government. It seems the visionary human has parted ways with the doggy team. I commend the president on getting that tail chaser out of the White House, slobbering on the furniture. It's not like he had a furball's chance of getting the doggy cuts into the funding bills anyway, so put that catnip in your pipe and smoke it.
The biggest ships in the sea, all owned by the oldest kings.
and their dying legacy, media deal leads. Soon will the Benny Show come to mind, the salt from Lives for Fun. Leave the gold and bring the gun, we sail for number one. Show come to mind, the salt from Lives for Fun. Leave the gold and bring the gun, we sail for number one. The biggest ships in the sea, all owned by the oldest king.